The world knows Michael Jordan lost about $2 million gambling. What they don't know is that the real number was $12 million. What they definitely don't know is that his father was murdered to keep that secret buried. This is the true story of how the greatest athlete in history became trapped by criminals who turned his success into their weapon, and why revealing the truth took 30 years and cost everything he loved. The snow fell thick and heavy on Chicago's South Side as Michael Jordan's black Mercedes pulled up to the abandoned warehouse. It was February 14, 1993, Valentine's Day. But there was nothing romantic about this meeting. The clock on his dashboard read 11:47 p.m. Michael sat in his car for a moment, engine still running, windshield wipers fighting the snow. He could drive away right now, go home to his mansion in Highland Park, pretend this problem would just disappear. But the men waiting inside weren't the type to be ignored. His hands shook as he turned off the engine. Not from the cold, but from fear. The great Michael Jordan, who had never been afraid of any opponent on a basketball court, was terrified of what waited for him behind those rusty warehouse doors. He pulled his Bulls championship jacket tight and stepped into the night. Snow crunched under his expensive shoes as he walked to a side door marked with a small red X. He knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times. The door opened immediately. "He's here," a young man in a dark suit said into a phone. He gestured for Michael to follow him inside. The warehouse smelled like old coffee, cigarettes, and something else Michael couldn't identify. Fear, maybe. His footsteps echoed in the empty space as they walked past stacks of boxes and old machinery, toward a light in the back corner. 3 men sat at a scarred wooden table under a single hanging bulb. Vincent Torino, silver-haired and wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, didn't look up when Michael approached. Tony Marcelli, younger with cold, dark eyes, shuffled through papers. The third man, someone Michael had never seen before, just stared at him with the look of a hungry animal. "Sit down, Michael," Torino said, finally raising his eyes. His voice was calm, like a businessman discussing a normal deal. But Michael knew better. Michael sat in the metal chair across from them. The table between them felt like a barrier, between 2 different worlds, his world of basketball fame and fortune, and their world of shadows and violence. Torino slid a manila folder across the table. "Open it." Michael's hands trembled as he lifted the cover. Inside were photographs that made his stomach drop. Pictures of him at underground poker games he thought were secret. Betting slips with his signature. Casino receipts from late night, visits he'd tried to hide, but the photos that made his blood freeze were at the bottom. His father, James Jordan, pumping gas at his station in North Carolina. His father buying groceries. His father playing golf, completely unaware someone was watching him. $12 million, Torino said quietly. "That's what you really owe us, Michael. Not the $2 million the newspapers know about. $12 million. Michael felt like he might throw up. That's impossible. I've been keeping track. It's not nearly that much." Tony Marcelli laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been keeping track of the legal stuff. The casino visits, the golf bets with friends. You haven't been tracking our private games, the compound interest, the fees for our patients." The third man spoke for the first time. His voice sounded like gravel. "The public thinks Michael Jordan has a little gambling problem. They think you bet too much on golf games and lost some money in Atlantic City. They have no idea about the real debt." "Why not?" Michael asked. "Why keep it secret?" Torino leaned forward. "Because a superstar athlete with a small gambling problem is a human interest story. A superstar athlete who owes $12 million to people like us? That's a scandal that destroys everything. Your reputation, your family's safety, your team's success. Everything you've worked for. Michael stared at the photos of his father. James Jordan looked so peaceful, so unaware of the danger his son had brought into their lives. "What do you want from me?" Michael whispered. "We want our money," Martelli said, "but we also want our secret kept. You keep playing basketball, keep making money, keep being America's hero, and you never, ever tell anyone about the real amount you owe us." "And if I refuse?" Torino tapped the photo of James Jordan. "Your father looks like such a nice man. Retired, enjoying his golden years. Would be terrible if something interrupted that peace." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Michael understood now that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. These men owned him. "I need time," Michael said. "Time is what champions don't always have," the third man replied. "Your next payment is due in 30 days, $3 million. And Michael, after tonight, we're going to be watching you much more closely." As Michael left the warehouse, walking back through the snow to his car, he knew his life would never be the same. In 4 months, he would shock the world by retiring from basketball at the height of his career. But the real reason wouldn't be what people thought. 3 years earlier, Michael Jordan was living every athlete's dream. It was 1990, and he had just led the Chicago Bulls past the Detroit Pistons in the playoffs. The team that had beaten him for years was finally defeated. Kids across America wore his shoes. Adults quoted his Nike commercials. He was the most famous athlete in the world. But behind the perfect smile and incredible moves on the court, Michael had a problem. It started small, like a tiny crack in a dam. But cracks have a way of growing until the whole dam breaks apart. It began on team flights. After games, when the Bulls were flying to their next city, players would pull out cards to pass the time. Charles Barkley from the Phoenix Suns, Magic Johnson from the Lakers, and other NBA stars all played together during all-star games and team trips. "Come on, Mike," Charles would say, shuffling a deck of cards with his huge hands. "Just a friendly game between friends. Nothing serious." Michael's competitive nature wouldn't let him say no. If he could beat anyone at basketball, why not poker? The game started with small bets, maybe $100 or $200. Losing felt like nothing when you made millions playing basketball. "I'll see your 100 and raise you 200, Michael would say, studying his cards with the same focus he used to. Read defenses on the court. But then the bets got bigger. $500. 1,000. Soon, losing several $1,000s in one card game felt normal. Michael told himself it was just entertainment, like going to an expensive restaurant or buying a nice car. The real trouble started during the 1991 playoffs. Michael couldn't sleep before big games. His mind raced with thoughts about plays, strategies, and what might go wrong. So he started driving to Atlantic City to relax. The casinos were open all night. The lights were bright and colorful. The sounds of slot machines and cheering crowds reminded him of basketball arenas. It felt like a place where he belonged. "Good evening, Mr. Jordan," the casino managers would say when he walked in. They treated him like royalty. Free drinks, private rooms, beautiful women who laughed at his jokes. It felt good to be treated special, even though he was already the most famous athlete in America. But relaxing at the casino turned into all-night gambling sessions. Michael would arrive after team meetings and stay until dawn, playing blackjack, craps, and poker. He would come to morning practice tired, with red eyes and shaking hands. Scottie Pippen, his teammate and best friend, started noticing changes. "You okay, Mike?" Scotty asked after Michael missed 5 free throws in a row during practice. "You seem off lately." "I'm fine," Michael snapped. But he wasn't fine. He was losing thousands of dollars every week, and the losses were getting bigger because winning felt so good that he had to bet more to feel anything. By 1992, Michael's gambling had spread beyond casinos. He bet on everything: golf games with friends, card games with strangers, even which elevator would arrive first at his hotel. The amounts kept growing because his competitive spirit couldn't handle losing. "Want to make it interesting?" became his favorite phrase. Whether it was a round of golf or a coin flip, Michael had to have money riding on the outcome. The real danger started when he met Vincent Torino through a golf connection. Torino seemed like a successful businessman who enjoyed high stakes poker games. He was charming, funny, and made Michael feel like they were just 2 rich guys having fun. "I know some people who like to play cards," Torino told Michael after a golf game in the summer of 1992. "Real players, not like those amateurs at the casinos. You interested?" The first game was at Torino's luxury apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. The view was beautiful, the food was expensive, and the other players seemed like wealthy businessmen. The buy-in was $50,000, pocket change for someone, making Michael's salary. Michael lost that first night, but Torino was gracious about it. "Don't worry about it tonight, champ," Torino said with a warm smile as Michael reached for his checkbook. "We're friends here. Pay me next week when it's convenient." That kindness was a trap, but Michael didn't see it coming. Each game after that, the stakes got higher. 50,000 became 100,000, then 200,000. Each loss was met with the same understanding smile from Torino. "No rush," Torino would always say. "Between friends, these things work themselves out." By early 1993, Michael owed Torino's organization several $1 million. Not the couple million that newspapers would eventually report from his legal gambling, but real money. Enough to buy a small skyscraper. The stress began eating him alive from the inside. He became distant and angry at home. His wife, Juanita, noticed he was different, but couldn't understand why. "What's wrong with you lately?" she asked one evening after he snapped at their son for asking him to play catch. "Nothing's wrong. I'm just tired." But everything was wrong. His children barely saw their father anymore because he was always at business meetings he couldn't explain. These meetings were really sessions with Torino, trying to figure out payment plans and borrowing more money to pay off previous debts. "Daddy, will you play with me?" his young son Marcus asked one afternoon, holding a basketball. "Not now," Michael said, his mind calculating his latest losses. "I'm busy." The look of hurt and confusion on his son's face would haunt Michael for years. He was supposed to be Superman to his kids, but he felt more like a villain in his own family's story. During Bulls practice, Coach Phil Jackson noticed something was wrong. "Whatever's bothering you, we can work through it together," Phil said, after finding Michael sitting alone in the locker room, staring at the floor. Michael wanted to tell him everything. He wanted to explain how he'd thrown away millions of dollars on stupid bets and card games. He wanted to admit that dangerous people now controlled his life, but shame kept the words locked inside his throat. "I'm fine, Phil. Just the usual season stress." Phil didn't believe him, but he respected Michael's privacy. He had no idea that his greatest player was drowning in an ocean of debt, surrounded by sharks who were getting hungrier every day. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, Michael would sit in his empty house and wonder how everything had gone so wrong. He'd achieved everything a basketball player could dream of: championships, money, fame, respect. But none of it mattered when you owed $12 million to people who collected their debts in ways that had nothing to do with courts or lawyers. The worst part was that he couldn't tell anyone. His friends wouldn't understand. His family would be horrified. His teammates would lose respect for him. So he carried the secret alone, feeling more isolated every day, despite being surrounded by people who loved him. In 3 months, Vincent Torino would call that meeting at the warehouse, and Michael Jordan's life would change forever. James Jordan had always been able to read his son like an open book. In early 1993, he could see something was eating Michael alive from the inside, but he couldn't figure out what it was. "Son, you look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," James said during a visit to Michael's Chicago mansion in March. He sat in the living room, watching his famous son pace back and forth like a caged animal. Michael stopped pacing and forced a smile. "Just basketball pressure, Dad. You know how it is during the playoffs." But James Jordan didn't believe that for a second. He'd watched his boy handle pressure his entire life. From high school games in Wilmington, North Carolina, to college championships at the University of North Carolina, to NBA finals. This was something different. Michael seemed scared, and James had never seen his son scared of anything. "Michael, I've been your father for 30 years. I know when something's wrong. Really wrong." Michael sat down across from his father, the man who had worked 2 jobs to support his family, who had never missed a game when Michael was growing up, who had always been his biggest supporter. "Dad, Michael started, then stopped. How could he explain that he'd gambled away millions of dollars? How could he tell his father that dangerous people were now part of their lives? How could he admit that his competitive nature had become a curse that threatened everyone he loved? "I'm just tired," Michael finally said. "The season's been long." James studied his son's face. He saw the dark circles under Michael's eyes, the way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking, the forced smile that never reached his eyes anymore. What James didn't know was that Vincent Torino's people had been watching the Jordan family for weeks. They had taken pictures of James at his gas station job in Wilmington. They knew what time he arrived at work, where he bought groceries, which golf course he played at on weekends. Torino's plan was simple but cruel. Apply pressure to Michael through the people he loved most. James Jordan was the perfect target. A kind, gentle man who lived quietly and trusted everyone he met. "Your father seems like a real nice guy," Tony Marcelli had told Michael during their last meeting. "Retired, enjoying life, playing golf. Must be nice to have that kind of peace and quiet." The comment had sent chills down Michael's spine, but he tried to convince himself it was just conversation. During the 1993 NBA playoffs, Michael's debt situation reached a crisis point. The Bulls were fighting their way toward another championship, but Michael could barely focus on basketball. His mind was always calculating numbers, how much he owed, how much he could pay, how long these people would stay patient. After a particularly bad game against the New York Knicks, where Michael shot poorly and seemed distracted, he called his father from his hotel room. "Dad, I need to ask you something." "What is it, son?" Michael wanted to ask his father to be careful, to watch out, for strangers, to maybe stay with friends for a while. But how could he explain why without telling the whole terrible story? Just take care of yourself, okay? And if anyone you don't know tries to talk to you or asks questions about me, don't engage with them. James was quiet for a moment. "Michael, are you in some kind of trouble?" "No, Dad. I just worry about you sometimes. You're getting older, and there are crazy people out there who might want to bother you because you're my father." "Don't worry about me, son. I can take care of myself. You focus on winning that championship." But Michael couldn't stop worrying. After the Bulls won their third straight championship in June 1993, instead of celebrating, Michael met with Torino at a restaurant downtown. "Congratulations, champ," Torino said, raising a glass of expensive wine. "3 championships in a row. Your father must be so proud." Every time Torino mentioned his father, Michael felt his stomach clench with fear. "Leave my family out of this. Your family is already in this, Michael. Your gambling brought them into it. But don't worry. As long as you keep cooperating, they'll stay safe." Torino slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photographs that made Michael's blood run cold. His father pumping gas, his father buying groceries, his father playing golf with friends. All taken without James knowing he was being watched. "These are just to show you how easy it would be," Torino explained calmly. "Your father has no idea he's being photographed. He trusts the world. That's beautiful, but it's also dangerous." Michael's hands shook as he looked at the pictures. "What do you want?" $12 million, as we discussed. But we're reasonable people. We understand cash flow problems. We're willing to work out a payment plan. How long? 2 years, $6 million per year. Very manageable for someone with your income. Michael did the math in his head. $6 million a year meant he'd have to dedicate almost half his basketball earnings to paying these criminals. But what choice did he have? "And my family stays safe? As long as you pay on time and keep quiet about our arrangement, your family will never have any problems." That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He walked around his house, looking at family photos, thinking about his father. James Jordan was the best man Michael knew. Honest, hardworking, loving. He didn't deserve to be pulled into this nightmare. 2 weeks later, James decided to drive from Chicago back to North Carolina after visiting Michael and the grandchildren. It was a trip he'd made many times before, a peaceful journey through the countryside that gave him time to think and listen to music. He called Michael from a rest stop in South Carolina. "I had such a wonderful visit," James said, his voice warm and happy. "Those grandkids of yours are growing up so fast. Make sure you spend time with them, son. They won't be little forever." "I will, Dad. Drive carefully, okay? And call me when you get home. Don't worry about me. I've been driving these roads for 40 years. Love you, son." "Love you too, Dad." Those were the last words they ever spoke to each other. When James Jordan pulled over to rest at a highway stop that night, he thought he was alone. But 2 men had been following him since he left Chicago. Men who had been paid to send Michael Jordan a message about the importance of paying debts on time. The official story would blame random criminals looking for money and a car, but Michael knew better. When the phone rang at 3 a.m. and the police told him his father was dead, Michael's world collapsed completely. He fell to his knees in his hallway, sobbing like a child. Juanita ran to him, thinking he was having some kind of medical emergency. "They killed him," Michael whispered. "They killed my father." "Who? Michael? What are you talking about?" But Michael couldn't explain. Not yet. Maybe not ever. At the funeral, Michael could barely stand upright. His mother, Dolores, held him as he cried uncontrollably. The whole world watched, thinking they were seeing a son grieve for his beloved father. They didn't realize they were watching a man who believed his own choices had caused that death. "This is my fault," Michael whispered to himself as they lowered his father's coffin into the ground. "All my fault." The next day, a flower arrangement arrived at the Jordan family home. The card read simply, "Our deepest condolences." Vincent. The message was clear. They could reach anyone in his family. Anywhere. Anytime. Standing in his father's empty house in Wilmington 3 days later, surrounded by memories of a man who had loved him unconditionally, Michael Jordan made a decision that would shock the sports world. He picked up the phone and called his agent. "I'm done," Michael said, his voice hollow and broken. "I'm retiring from basketball." October 6, 1993. The most shocking press conference in sports history was about to begin. Michael Jordan sat behind a table covered with microphones, facing a room packed with confused reporters and stunned fans. "I've lost my desire to play basketball," Jordan told the crowd, his voice steady, but his eyes empty. "My father's death has changed my perspective on life. I want to spend time with my family and explore other interests." Every word tasted like poison in his mouth. The real reason he was retiring, to stop making money that would flow to his father's killers, could never be spoken. So he told the world's biggest sports lie and watched everyone believe it. Before the press conference, Jordan had endured the hardest meeting of his life. Vincent Torino sat across from him at a downtown Chicago restaurant, calmly cutting his steak while discussing Michael's future. "Retirement is a smart choice," Torino said, not looking up from his plate. "It solves problems for both of us." "How does this help you?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I'm not playing basketball, I can't make money to pay you." Torino finally looked at him and smiled. It was the same warm smile he'd used during their first poker games. But now, it made Michael's skin crawl. "You're thinking too small, Michael. Your retirement creates mystery. Mystery makes you more valuable, not less. Nike stock actually went up when rumors of your retirement started spreading." Michael felt sick. Even walking away from basketball was being turned into a profit opportunity for these criminals. "Your endorsement deals become more precious because they're limited," Tony Marcelli added, joining the conversation. "Your restaurant investments, your real estate deals, all of that continues making money. We just restructure how you pay us." "What? About my family?" Michael asked, the question that kept him awake every night. "Safe," Torino promised, "as long as you stay quiet and stay retired." The baseball experiment that followed wasn't Michael chasing childhood dreams. It was part of the deal. Baseball was safe territory, controlled by different people who had no connection to underground gambling. Playing for the Birmingham Barons minor league team was the most humbling experience of Michael's life. Here was the greatest basketball player in the world, striking out in front of crowds of 3,000 people. "You'll get better with practice," teammate Steve Martinez told him after another tough game. "Everyone struggles when they're learning." Michael appreciated the kindness, but everything felt fake. He was living a lie that hurt everyone around him. Teammates who thought he was following dreams, fans who admired his courage, family members who believed his public story. The hardest moments came when his former Bulls teammates called, begging him to come back. "The team needs you, Mike," Scottie Pippen said during a visit to Birmingham. "We all need you. This isn't just about basketball anymore." Jordan's heart broke a little more each time. These people loved him and believed in him, but they couldn't understand that returning to basketball meant restarting the cycle that had killed his father. While Michael played baseball in small stadiums, Vincent Torino's organization worked behind the scenes to collect their money through his existing businesses. Nike payments were quietly redirected. Restaurant profits were moved through shell companies. Real estate deals were restructured. David Chen, Michael's new business manager, had been told enough about the situation to handle these arrangements without asking too many questions. We can maintain payments of about $3 million per year through your existing income streams, Chen explained during a private meeting. At that rate, the debt will be cleared in 4 years. 4 years. 4 years of exile from the sport he too loved. 4 years of lying to everyone who cared about him. The worst part was that Michael couldn't even enjoy memories of his father without feeling guilty. Every photo, every video of James cheering in the stands, every memory of his proud smile was poisoned by the knowledge that Michael's gambling had led to his death. Letters from children made it even harder. A 9-year-old girl from Chicago wrote, "Dear Mr. Jordan, I hope you come back soon. Basketball is boring without you. My dad says you're the greatest ever. Please, don't stay sad about your daddy." Reading that letter, Michael realized millions of people had invested their hearts in his story, and he was lying to all of them. Kids looked up to him. Adults found inspiration in his success, and he was keeping terrible secrets from everyone who believed. In him, Vincent Torino called occasionally to check on his investment. "How's baseball treating you, champ?" "Fine," Michael would answer, hating himself for the casual conversation. "Good. Remember, patience is important for everyone involved. Your debt gets smaller every month, and your family stays safe." During long nights in hotel rooms across the minor leagues, Michael would stare at his 3 championship rings and cry. He'd achieved everything an athlete could dream of, but none of it mattered now. His competitive drive, the same quality that made him great, had become a curse that destroyed everything good in his life. The greatest irony was that retirement made him more famous, not less. Documentaries were made about his decision. Books were written analyzing his choice. Everyone wanted to understand why the world's best athlete would walk away at the peak of his powers. If they only knew the truth, Michael thought. If they only knew that their hero was paying for his father's murder one business deal at a time. By the end of 1994, Michael had paid back about half his debt through the complex financial arrangements David Chen managed. But every dollar felt like blood money, and Michael wondered if he would ever truly be free of the people who had destroyed his life. The basketball court had once been his sanctuary. Now it felt like a prison he could never return to without putting everyone he loved in danger. Michael Jordan, the man the world called the greatest athlete ever, had become a prisoner of his own success and a slave to his worst decisions. March 1995. The phone call came at 6:15 a.m., jerking Michael awake, in his hotel room in Birmingham. He'd been dreaming about his father again, one of those good dreams where James was still alive, still proud of his son. The phone's ringing shattered that peaceful moment. "Time to come back, Michael." Vincent Torino's voice was different now, colder. No more friendly warmth. Michael sat up in bed, instantly awake. "What do you mean? Baseball's been fun, but fun time is over. You're worth more on a basketball court than a baseball field. My bosses want to see faster progress on your debt." Michael felt the walls closing in around him. "We had a deal. 4 years of payments through my other businesses. Deals change when circumstances change. You have 30 days to announce your return to the NBA." The line went dead. Michael stared at the phone, realizing his carefully built prison was about to get much smaller. 2 weeks later, Michael sat in a private dining room at an expensive Chicago steakhouse. Across from him were 2 men he'd never seen before. Older, quieter, and far more dangerous than Torino. "Mr. Jordan," said Carlo Benedetti, a thin man with gray hair who barely looked up from cutting his meat. "You owe us money. Baseball is admirable, but it's not profitable for our organization." Your earning potential in basketball is 4 times what it is in baseball, added Frank Romano, studying Michael like he was examining a racehorse. Our financial people have run all the numbers. Michael felt like an animal being discussed by its owners. If I return to basketball, the gambling temptations will come back. That's how this whole mess started. Benedetti finally looked at him. His eyes were like black ice. Your gambling is no longer your concern. It's ours. We'll be monitoring your activities much more closely this time. They slid a thick document across the table. As Michael read it, his heart sank deeper with each page. His return to basketball would come with new rules. No casinos without approved escorts. No private card games. No bets above $1,000 without permission. You're turning me into a prisoner, Michael said. You turned yourself into a prisoner, Romano replied. We're just managing the situation more efficiently. 3 days later, Michael sent a simple fax to sports reporters. I'm back. 2 words that made headlines around the world. ESPN interrupted regular programming. Sports fans everywhere went crazy with excitement. Michael Jordan was returning to basketball. But for Michael, sending that fax felt like signing his own death warrant. His first game back was against the Indiana Pacers on March 19, 1995. He walked into the United Center wearing number 45 instead of his famous 23, and the crowd exploded with cheers that shook the building. This is incredible, teammate, Scottie Pippen said, hugging Michael before the game with tears in his eyes. Having you back feels like a miracle. Michael forced a smile, but inside he felt nothing. This should have been the happiest moment of his life, but every cheer reminded him that he wasn't really free. He scored 19 points that night, showing flashes of his old greatness but obvious signs of rust. The crowd didn't care. They chanted, MVP! MVP! every time he touched the ball. After the game, reporters surrounded him with the same questions they always asked. How does it feel to be back? Are you happy with your performance? What made you decide to return? Michael gave the answers they wanted to hear. He talked about missing the competition, missing his teammates, rediscovering his love for the game. Every word was a lie, but the sports world ate it up. What the reporters didn't notice were the new faces in the arena. Men in expensive suits sitting in different sections, watching Michael with the focus of prison guards. Torino's organization was keeping their promise to monitor him closely. 2 weeks into his comeback, Michael found a package in his locker before a game against the Boston Celtics. Inside was a photo of his children playing in their backyard, taken with a long-distance camera from someone hiding in the trees. There was no note, but the message was crystal clear. We're always watching. That night, Michael called Torino from his car. Did you have someone take pictures of my kids? He demanded. What pictures? Michael, you're being paranoid. Focus on basketball, not imaginary problems. But Michael understood that even Torino might not control everything anymore. The organization was bigger and more complex than he'd realized, with layers of command he couldn't see or predict. As the season progressed, Michael's play improved dramatically. By the playoffs, he was averaging 31 points per game, looking like his old, dominant self. The Bulls made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals before losing to the Orlando Magic. But every great performance felt hollow because Michael knew who was really benefiting from his success. Every point he scored, every game he won, every dollar he earned, it all went toward paying the people who had killed his father. The worst part was that everyone around him thought his return was triumphant. Teammates celebrated having him back. Fans wore his jersey with pride. The media called it one of sports' greatest comebacks. None of them knew that their hero was trapped in a nightmare that got worse with every passing day, forced to use his talents to enrich the criminals who had destroyed his family and stolen his freedom. The Chicago Bulls were unstoppable. Michael Jordan led them to a record-breaking 72-10 regular season, the best in NBA history. The entire city of Chicago was painted red as Bulls fever took over. Michael was once again the king of basketball, but each victory felt like another chain around his neck, binding him tighter to the people who had destroyed his life. The monthly poker games at Michael's Highland Park mansion had become elaborate traps. Wealthy businessmen, Hollywood actors, and professional athletes gathered in his recreation room for what they thought were friendly games with $100,000 buy-ins. "Michael, you throw the best card games in Chicago," said Robert Kellman, a real estate developer who had lost $400,000 over 4 months. "Though I really need to start winning some of this money back soon." Michael smiled and dealt the cards, hating every second of it. These weren't really games. They were recruitment sessions for Torino's organization. And Michael was the bait that lured in new victims. David Chen, Michael's business manager, was drowning in the complexity of managing legitimate businesses, mixed with criminal money. "They want you to invest in a casino project in Las Vegas," Chen told Michael during one of their secret meetings. "It's obviously money laundering. $5 million. "How much does that reduce my debt?" Michael asked, feeling sick. "They'll count it as $3 million toward what you owe." Michael's debt had shrunk to about $4 million, but every payment came with a terrible price. His name was now attached to businesses he'd never seen, investments he didn't understand, and partnerships with people he'd never met. During the 1996 NBA Finals against the Seattle Supersonics, Michael played some of the best basketball of his life. He averaged 27 points per game and led the Bulls to their 4th championship. But the famous photograph of him crying while clutching the basketball after the final victory captured more than just joy. Those tears were for his father, who couldn't witness this incredible moment. Those tears were for the family he felt like he was failing every day. Those tears were for the man he used to be, before gambling turned him into someone he barely recognized. In the locker room after Game 6, while his teammates sprayed champagne and celebrated, Michael slipped away to find some quiet. Phil Jackson found him sitting alone in the hallway, still in his uniform. "You should be the happiest man alive right now," Phil said, sitting down beside him. "I am happy," Michael lied. Phil studied his greatest player's face. "I've been coaching for 25 years. I've never seen someone look so sad after winning a championship. Talk to me, Michael." Michael almost broke down and told him everything right then. But Tony Marcelli's words echoed in his mind. "The fewer people who know, the safer everyone stays." "I just miss my father," Michael said, which was true but incomplete. That summer, the criminal organization introduced Michael to an even darker world. Carlo Benedetti arranged a meeting at Navy Pier, where they walked among tourists and families, enjoying a beautiful Chicago day. "We have opportunities in sports betting," Benedetti explained casually, as if they were discussing the weather. "Nothing that affects game outcomes directly. Just information that helps us make better predictions." Michael felt his stomach drop. "You want me to give you inside information about my own team. Information you naturally have access to. Player. Injuries that aren't public yet. Team strategies. Locker room morale. Simple things. You want me to spy on my teammates." Benedetti stopped walking and looked at him. "We want you to share knowledge that could be profitable. There's a big difference." 2 weeks later, Michael found himself in the most shameful moment of his life. He sat across from Tony Marcelli at a coffee shop, betraying people who trusted him. "Scotty's ankle is bothering him more than the medical reports say," Michael heard himself saying. "He's playing hurt, but the team doesn't want other teams to know." The information was used to adjust betting lines for Bulls games, making money for criminals while Michael felt like he was poison in his own locker room. His marriage to Juanita was crumbling under the weight of secrets he couldn't share. She knew something was terribly wrong, but couldn't understand what was happening to her husband. "You're like a ghost in your own life," she told him after another argument about his mysterious behavior. "Ever since your father died, you've been living some kind of double life I don't understand." "I'm trying to protect this family," Michael replied, which was true but sounded like an excuse. "Protect us from what? Michael? What are you hiding from me?" He couldn't answer without putting her in danger, so he said nothing and watched their marriage slowly die. His children, now teenagers, barely knew their father anymore. Michael Jr. had started getting in trouble at school, acting out because of his father's constant emotional absence. "Dad, why don't you ever seem happy anymore?" his daughter asked him one evening while they sat in their enormous house that felt empty despite being full of people. "Even when you win championships, you look sad." Michael looked at her innocent face and felt his heart shatter. He was supposed to be her hero, but he felt more like a villain who was slowly poisoning everyone around him. The absolute worst moment came during a Bulls practice when Scottie Pippen pulled him aside with genuine concern. "Mike, there are reporters asking questions about gambling again. More serious questions this time. Is there something I should know about?" Michael's blood turned to ice. If the media started digging deeper into his gambling, they might uncover connections to his father's death. An investigation could expose everything and put his family in even more danger. "It's nothing," Michael told his best friend, lying directly to his face. "Just the same old stories from people trying to bring me down." That night, Michael called Marcelli in a panic. "The media is getting suspicious. There might be an investigation. We're aware of the situation," Marcelli said calmly. "Don't worry, we have people who handle media problems." "What do you mean?" "Sometimes reporters find better opportunities in other cities. Sometimes they decide certain stories aren't worth the trouble." A week later, the reporter who had been asking the most aggressive questions suddenly received an offer to work for a television network in Los Angeles. The investigation quietly disappeared. Michael realized he wasn't just trapped by criminals, he was protected by them. His fame and success had made him too valuable to expose, but also too dangerous to ever let go. Standing alone in his trophy room that night, surrounded by championship rings and MVP awards, Michael understood the full scope of his prison. He was the most successful athlete in the world, but he felt like the most powerless man alive. 1998, the Chicago Bulls' final championship. Michael Jordan scored 45 points in Game 6 against the Utah Jazz, hitting the shot that would become basketball legend. He held his follow-through, arm extended, watching the ball drop through the net as 23,000 fans exploded in celebration. But even in that perfect moment, Michael felt only emptiness. 5 years had passed since his father's death, and he was still trapped in the same nightmare that had destroyed his family. After his teammates went home and the stadium emptied, Michael sat alone in the Bulls' locker room. The championship trophy gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but it felt cold and meaningless. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but hoped he'd never have to use. "Detective Williams, Chicago Police," a voice answered on the third ring. "This is Michael Jordan. I need to talk to you about my father's murder. They met at sunrise on Montrose Beach, when Lake Michigan was calm and the city was still sleeping. Michael sat on a wooden bench, watching seagulls dive for fish, when a man in a worn coat approached. "Detective Samuel Williams," the man said, sitting down beside him. "I've been investigating your father's case for 5 years. I always believed there was more to the story." Michael had been secretly investigating his father's death since 1993, using private detectives and his own connections to find the truth. Every lead pointed to the same conclusion. James Jordan had been murdered by people connected to his son's gambling debts. "I know who killed my father," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if I tell you everything, it won't just be about murder. It's about things that could destroy innocent people." Williams leaned forward. He'd worked homicide for 15 years and had developed a sense for when someone was ready to tell the truth. "I'm listening." Michael took the deepest breath of his life and began telling a story he'd never spoken aloud. He talked about the gradual slide into gambling addiction, the underground poker games at Vincent Torino's apartment, the mounting debts that spiraled beyond control. $12 million, Michael said, looking out at the lake. "That's what I really owed them, not the $2 million the newspapers reported." Williams stayed quiet, letting Michael tell his story at his own pace. "They killed my father to send me a message, to show me what happened when debts weren't paid on time." "Why haven't you come forward before now?" Williams asked. Michael explained about his continued involvement with Torino's organization, the monthly poker games that recruited new victims, the business investments that were really money laundering operations, the insider information about team injuries and strategies. "They own me completely," Michael admitted. "My debt is almost paid off, but I'm not just a debtor anymore. I'm part of their operation. They've made me an accomplice." Williams pulled out a small digital recorder. "Are you ready to make this official?" Michael nodded. For the first time in 5 years, he was ready to tell the complete truth. "Vincent Torino runs an illegal gambling operation in Chicago," Michael began, speaking directly into the device. "His organization murdered my father, James Jordan, in July 1993 to force me to pay gambling debts totaling $12 million. For the next 2 hours, Michael provided details about every aspect of his involvement with the criminal organization. Names, dates, amounts of money, specific crimes he'd witnessed or participated in. "This goes beyond gambling debts," Williams said when Michael finished. "You're describing organized crime, racketeering, money laundering, possibly sports corruption. This is enormous." "I know," Michael replied. "That's why I stayed quiet for so long. But I can't live with this anymore. Every time someone calls me a hero, I think about my father and what these people did to him." Williams was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of what he'd just heard. "If you testify against these people, you'll be painting a target on yourself and your family. They already killed my father. What more can they take from me?" Williams checked his recorder to make sure it was still working. "There's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told me yet." Michael hesitated, then decided to reveal the biggest secret of all. "I'm not the only athlete they've recruited. Charles Barkley has been fighting gambling debts to them for 2 years. They've approached other NBA players, NFL stars, even some baseball players. They use successful athletes as bait to recruit wealthy people into their games. How many people are we talking about? Dozens of athletes. Hundreds of wealthy victims who think they're just playing friendly games with famous people. It's a massive operation that uses sports celebrities to legitimize illegal gambling." Williams realized this was potentially the biggest sports corruption case in American history. The implications went far beyond one athlete's personal problems. "What do you want to happen now?" Williams asked. "I want justice for my father. I want these people stopped before they destroy more families. And I want to be free, even if it means losing everything I've worked for." Williams put away his recorder and shook Michael's hand. "This is going to change everything, Michael. Your life, your career, your public image. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Michael looked out at Lake Michigan, thinking about his father, his children, and all the lies he'd been living for 5 years. "I've been living in hell since 1993, he said. "It can't be worse than this." As they walked away from the beach, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not hope that his problems would disappear, but hope that he could finally stop living a lie. The investigation that would follow would expose one of the largest organized crime operations in sports history. It would destroy reputations, end careers, and send dozens of people to prison. But for Michael Jordan, it would also mean freedom from the secret that had poisoned every success and stolen every moment of joy for the past 5 years. His father's death would finally have justice, and the truth about Michael Jordan's gambling debts would finally be told. The greatest athlete of his generation was about to become something even more important: a man brave enough to tell the truth, no matter the cost. 6 months later, Federal Courthouse, Chicago. Michael Jordan walked up the courthouse steps, surrounded by FBI agents and lawyers. Hundreds of reporters pressed against police barriers, shouting questions and taking pictures. The man who had once been celebrated for his basketball achievements was now making headlines for very different reasons. "Mr. Jordan, are you afraid for your safety?" a reporter yelled. "Do you regret coming forward?" shouted another. Michael kept walking, his face set like stone. After 5 years of living lies, he had nothing left to hide. Inside the courtroom, Vincent Torino sat at the defendant's table in an orange prison jumpsuit. Gone were the expensive suits and friendly smiles. His hair had gone completely gray during 6 months in federal lockup, and his eyes held pure hatred when he looked at Michael. Also seated were Carlo Benedetti, Tony Marcelli, and 12 other members of what prosecutors called the largest organized crime operation in sports history. The FBI had arrested them in coordinated raids after Michael's testimony provided the evidence needed for warrants. The state calls Michael Jeffrey. "Jordan to the witness stand," announced prosecutor Sarah Chen. Michael stood and walked to the front of the courtroom. Every step felt like he was carrying the weight of his father's coffin all over again. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. "Mr. Jordan," Prosecutor Chen began, "please tell the court how much money you owed Vincent Torino's organization." $12 million, Michael said clearly, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. Not the $2 million that was reported in the newspapers. $12 million. A murmur went through the packed courtroom. This was the first time anyone had heard the real number publicly. "And how did this debt lead to your father's death?" Michael's voice cracked slightly. "They killed him to send me a message, to show me what happened when payments were late, to make me understand they could reach anyone in my family, anywhere, anytime." For 3 hours, Michael told the complete story. The gradual addiction to gambling, the underground poker games, the threats to his family, his forced retirement from basketball, the money laundering through his businesses, the insider information he'd been forced to provide. They didn't just want their money back, Michael explained. They wanted to use my fame to recruit other victims. Wealthy people who thought they were just playing cards with Michael Jordan, not knowing they were being set up by professional criminals. The defense attorney, a sharp woman in an expensive suit, tried to attack Michael's credibility during cross-examination. "Mr. Jordan, isn't it true that you're only testifying to reduce your own legal problems?" "No," Michael answered firmly. "I've already agreed to pay full restitution to the victims who lost money in games at my house. I'm testifying because my father was murdered, and I want justice. You claim you were forced to provide insider information about your team. But isn't it possible you were just a willing participant trying to win back your losses?" Michael looked directly at Vincent Torino. "They threatened my children. They showed me photographs of my kids playing in our backyard, taken by people hiding in the trees. I gave them information to keep my family safe, not to make money." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness confirmed Michael's testimony. Charles Barkley took the stand to admit he'd also been trapped by the organization. A dozen wealthy businessmen testified about losing money in poker games they thought were legitimate. FBI agents presented evidence of a network that had operated in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and Miami. Bank records showed millions of dollars in laundered money. Wiretaps revealed conversations about point spreads and game strategies. The most damaging evidence came from Vincent Torino's own lieutenant, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Torino ordered the hit on James Jordan, the man testified. He said the basketball player needed to understand that debts to our organization had serious consequences. When the verdicts were read, Vincent Torino was found guilty on all counts: racketeering, conspiracy, murder in the commission of a crime, money laundering, and sports bribery. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carlo Benedetti and Tony Marcelli each received 30-year sentences. The other defendants got between 10 and 25 years. As the judge read the sentences, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced since before his father's death. Relief. Not happiness, because nothing could bring James Jordan back, but relief that the truth was finally known. Outside the courthouse, Michael faced the media for the last time as an active NBA player. He had already announced his second retirement, this time permanently. "I want to say something to all the young people watching," Michael said, looking directly into the cameras. "Gambling destroyed my life and got my father killed. It doesn't matter how successful you are or how much money you have. Gambling addiction can destroy anyone." A reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Do you regret your basketball career?" Michael was quiet for a moment. "I regret the choices I made that led to my father's death. But I don't regret speaking the truth about what happened. My father always taught me to do the right thing, even when it's hard." 6 months after the trial ended, Michael quietly moved to North Carolina with his children. He bought a small farm outside Wilmington, not far from where he and his father had spent many peaceful hours together. He never played professional basketball again. The NBA investigated the games where Michael had provided insider information and found no evidence that any contests had been fixed. The league imposed new rules about player gambling and increased monitoring of suspicious betting patterns. Nike continued to support Michael despite the scandal, and his shoe business remained successful. But he donated most of the profits to organizations fighting gambling addiction and supporting families of murder victims. On quiet evenings, Michael would sit on his porch and think about his father. James Jordan had died because of his son's terrible choices, but his death had ultimately led to justice for many other families. Michael Jordan's basketball legacy was complicated forever. He was still considered one of the greatest players ever. But his story had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of gambling addiction. More importantly, he had become something his father would have been proud of. A man who chose truth over comfort, justice over reputation, and honesty over lies. The boy from Wilmington, who had once dreamed of basketball greatness, had learned the hardest lesson of all. Real courage isn't about what you do on a court. It's about what you do when everything you care about is on the line. In the end, Michael Jordan's greatest victory wasn't a championship. It was finding the strength to tell the truth and honor his father's memory, no matter the cost. 5 years after the trial. Michael Jordan sat on the porch of his North Carolina farm, watching his teenage children play basketball in the driveway. At 55 years old, he looked peaceful for the first time in decades. The weight he'd carried for so long had finally lifted. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Williams, Chicago PD. "Michael, I need to see you," Williams said, without greeting. "There's something about your father's case that never made it to trial. Something I think you deserve to know." 2 days later, Williams drove to the farm. They sat in Michael's living room, surrounded by family photos and a few championship trophies he'd kept. Williams carried a thick manila folder. "What I'm about to tell you will change how you see everything that happened," Williams began. "Your father wasn't just an innocent victim, Michael. He was investigating your gambling debts on his own." Michael felt the room spin. "What do you mean?" Williams opened the folder and pulled out photographs. "We found these in a safety deposit box your father rented under a different name 3 months before he died. He'd been tracking your activities, following you to casinos, documenting your gambling." The photos showed Michael entering underground poker games, meeting with Vincent Torino, looking distressed and desperate. His father had been watching him, trying to understand what was destroying his son. "He knew," Michael whispered. "He knew everything. Look at this." Williams handed him a letter written in his father's handwriting. "Dear Michael, I know about the gambling debts. I know about the dangerous people you've gotten involved with. I've been investigating them for months, trying to find a way to help you without putting the family at risk. I have evidence that could bring them down, but I need more time. If something happens to me, this letter will explain everything. Know that I love you, and none of this changes how proud I am of you. Your father." James Michael's hands shook as he read the letter 3 times. "He was trying to protect me. There's more." Williams pulled out bank records. "Your father had been secretly meeting with an FBI agent, providing information about Torino's organization. He was building a case to save you. The final piece of evidence was a recording device, small enough to fit in a shirt pocket." Williams plugged it into a small speaker. James Jordan's voice filled the room. "Vincent Torino threatened my son's family. He's using Michael's gambling addiction to force him into illegal activities. I have photographs of their meetings, financial records, and witness statements from other victims." The recording was dated 3 days before James Jordan's death. The FBI agent he was working with retired and moved to Florida before our investigation began, Williams explained. "We only found these materials last month when the bank contacted us about the unclaimed safety deposit box." Michael sat in stunned silence. His father hadn't been an innocent victim killed to send a message. He'd been a hero trying to save his son. Murdered because he was getting too close to exposing Torino's empire. "He died because he was fighting for me," Michael said quietly. "He died because he loved you enough to risk everything." Williams pulled out one final document. "There's something else. Your father's investigation helped us find evidence we missed during the original trial. Evidence that could have changed everything. The document was a recording of Vincent Torino talking to Tony Marcelli. The old man knows too much. We can't just scare him anymore. He has to be eliminated before he ruins everything. Why are you telling me this now? Michael asked. Because Vincent Torino's conviction is being appealed. His lawyers claim the murder charge was based on circumstantial evidence. This recording, combined with your father's investigation, proves premeditation. It seals the case forever. Michael walked to his window and looked out at the basketball hoop where his children were still playing. His father's sacrifice had been even greater than he'd known. "There's one more thing your father would want you to know," Williams said, softly. "The FBI agent he worked with told me something before he retired. Your father wasn't just investigating to save you. He was planning to write a book about gambling addiction and organized crime. He wanted to use your story to help other families." Michael turned back to Williams. "A book?" He believed that telling the truth about what happened to you could prevent other young athletes from making the same mistakes. Even in his final weeks, he was thinking about helping others. That evening, Michael called his children inside and told them about their grandfather's secret investigation. He explained how James Jordan had died not just as an innocent victim, but as a hero fighting for his family. "Grandpa was brave," his daughter said. "Yes," Michael replied. "He was braver than any athlete who ever lived." 2 months later, Michael published a book titled The Hidden Price: A Father's Love and a Son's Redemption. It told the complete story of his gambling addiction, his father's murder, and the criminal organization that had controlled his life. The book became a bestseller, but more importantly, it created a foundation that provided counseling for gambling addicts and support for their families. Michael donated all the profits to the foundation, continuing his father's mission to help others. At the book's launch event in Chicago, Michael read from the final chapter. "My father taught me that real strength isn't about winning games or scoring points. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the cost is everything you have." His courage saved not just me, but hundreds of families who might have been destroyed by the same criminal network. The audience, many of them former teammates and friends, gave him a standing ovation. For the first time in years, Michael felt truly proud of something he'd accomplished. Vincent Torino's appeal was denied. The new evidence ensured he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Justice for James Jordan was finally complete. On the 10th anniversary of his father's death, Michael visited the grave in Wilmington. He brought a copy of the book and placed it on the headstone. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "We told the truth, and it set everyone free." As he walked away from the cemetery, Michael understood that his father's greatest gift wasn't the love and support during his basketball career. It was the example of how to be brave when everything was at stake. Michael Jordan, the basketball player, would be remembered for championships and incredible performances. But Michael Jordan, the man, would be remembered for something more important: finding the courage to honor his father's sacrifice by choosing truth over comfort, and using his pain to help others find healing. The hidden price of his success had been enormous, but the value of the truth had been even greater. 10 years later, Michael Jordan sat in his office at the Jordan Foundation headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina. At 65 years old, his hair was completely gray, but his eyes held a peace that had been missing for most of his adult life. On his desk was a letter that had arrived that morning. The return address made his hands tremble. Illinois Department of Corrections. "Mr. Jordan, my name is Vincent Torino Jr. You knew my father. He died in prison last week from cancer. Before he died, he asked me to deliver a message to you. He wanted you to know he was sorry for what happened to your father. He said the guilt had eaten him alive for 25 years. He also wanted you to have this. Inside the envelope was a small key and an address in Chicago. 3 days later, Michael stood outside a storage unit on Chicago's west side. Detective Williams, now retired, had come with him. Neither man knew what to expect as Michael turned the key. The unit was filled with boxes, each labeled with dates from 1990 to 1993. Inside were documents that told the complete story of Vincent Torino's criminal empire. Names, dates, financial records, and photographs that had never been seen by law enforcement. "This is incredible," Williams said, examining the papers. "These records show the organization was much larger than we ever knew. They had athletes in every major sport, not just basketball." But the most shocking discovery was in the last box Michael opened. Inside was a thick folder labeled James Jordan Investigation and a letter in Torino's handwriting. "Michael, for 25 years, I've carried the truth about your father's death. The official story was that we killed him to send you a message about paying your debts. That was only half true. Your father was getting close to exposing our entire operation. But the real reason we had him killed was because he'd discovered something that could have destroyed us all. He found out about the point shaving." Michael sat down hard on a crate, the letter shaking in his hands. "We had been paying players on several NBA teams to miss shots and affect point spreads. Not to lose games completely. That would be too obvious. Just to miss by a point or two when the betting was heavy. Your father had evidence that could have brought down not just our organization, but exposed corruption throughout professional sports. He had photographs, financial records, even recordings of players receiving payments. The night he was killed, he was driving to meet with a federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. He was going to turn over everything he'd collected. We couldn't let that happen. Too many people's lives would have been ruined. Too much money was at stake. I've lived with this guilt every day since. Your father died not just because he loved you, but because he was about to expose the biggest sports scandal in American history." Williams read over Michael's shoulder, his face growing pale. "Michael, if this is true, it means dozens of games were fixed. Championships might have been decided by criminals." Michael continued reading, his father's sacrifice becoming even more profound with each word. "The evidence your father collected is in this storage unit. I kept it as insurance for 25 years. Now it's yours to do with as you see fit. I know this doesn't bring your father back or erase the pain I caused your family, but maybe knowing the full truth about his courage will give you some peace. Your father was a better man than any of us. He died a hero's death, fighting corruption that would have infected sports for generations." Vincent Torino. The final box contained everything James Jordan had gathered in his secret investigation. Photographs of players receiving envelopes of cash. Bank records showing payments to athletes across multiple sports. Recorded conversations between Torino's men and corrupt players and referees. "This goes back decades," Williams said, studying the timeline. "Your father uncovered a systematic corruption of professional sports that involved hundreds of people." Michael found his father's journal, written in the months before his death. The entries revealed a man tormented by what he'd discovered, but determined to expose the truth. March 15, 1993, confirmed 3 Bulls players are receiving payments to affect point spreads. None are starters, but they play enough minutes to influence games. Michael has no idea. April 2, 1993, found evidence of similar operations in NFL and MLB. This is much bigger than just basketball. June 10, 1993, meeting with FBI agent Morrison next week. We'll turn over everything. Pray Michael can forgive me for keeping this secret, but he's too close to the situation to be objective. July 1st, 1993. Torino suspects I know something. Staying in public places, varying my routine. If something happens to me, I've hidden copies of everything in 3 different locations. The final entry was dated July 20th, 1993, 3 days before James Jordan's death. July 20th, 1993. Meeting with federal prosecutor in Washington on July 23rd. This nightmare will finally end. Michael will be free, and justice will be served. I pray he'll understand why I had to do this alone. Michael closed the journal and sat in silence for several minutes. His father hadn't just died trying to save him from gambling debts. He'd died trying to save the integrity of sports itself. "What do we do with all this?" Williams asked. Michael looked around the storage unit, filled with evidence of decades of corruption. His father had died protecting these secrets, believing they would someday serve justice. "We finish what my father started," Michael said quietly. "We tell the whole truth." 6 months later, Michael held another press conference. This time, he wasn't just talking about his own story. He was exposing the systematic corruption his father had died trying to reveal. The scandal that followed was unprecedented. Dozens of athletes, referees, and team officials were indicted. Several championship games from the 1990s were investigated for possible manipulation. The integrity of professional sports was questioned like never before. But from the ashes of that corruption came reform. New oversight systems were implemented. Gambling education became mandatory for all professional athletes. The monitoring of betting patterns became sophisticated enough to detect the smallest irregularities. Michael's foundation expanded its mission beyond gambling addiction to include education about sports integrity. He traveled the country speaking to young athletes about the temptations they would face and the importance of protecting the games they loved. At his final public appearance, Michael stood at the podium where his basketball career had begun, Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke University. He was presenting scholarships to students who had overcome addiction and adversity. "My father died believing that truth and integrity were worth any sacrifice," Michael told the audience. He was right. The games we love are only meaningful when they're honest. The victories only matter when they're earned. In the front row sat his children, now adults with families of their own. Behind them were dozens of young people whose lives had been changed by the foundation his father's courage had made possible. "People ask me what my greatest achievement was," Michael continued. 6 championships, 5 MVPs, countless records. But none of that compares to finally understanding what my father died for. The idea that doing what's right is more important than winning. As he left the stage for the final time, Michael felt his father's presence in a way he hadn't since that July night in 1993. James Jordan's investigation had uncovered the biggest scandal in sports history. His death had meant something far greater than anyone had imagined. The hidden price of Michael's success had cost his father's life, but the truth they'd fought to reveal had protected the integrity of sports for future generations. In the end, James and Michael Jordan had won the most important game of all, the fight for honesty in a world that profited from lies. 25 years after the trial, the Jordan Sports Integrity Center stood gleaming in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina. Michael Jordan, now 75 years old, walked slowly through the halls filled with photographs and exhibits dedicated to fighting corruption in athletics. Today was special. Today, Vincent Torino Jr. was coming to visit. Vincent Jr. was different. From his father, a college professor who taught ethics and had spent decades trying to make amends for his family's crimes. He'd helped investigators uncover more of his father's operation and had become an advocate for sports integrity. "Mr. Jordan," Vincent Jr. said as they met in Michael's office, "thank you for agreeing to see me." Your father's final letter changed everything, Michael replied, gesturing to a chair. "Without those records, we never would have known the full scope of the corruption." Vincent Jr. pulled out a worn notebook. "There's something else, something my father never put in writing, but told me on his deathbed." Michael leaned forward, curious. "He said your father discovered something even bigger than point shaving. He found evidence that some championship games had been completely fixed, not just influenced by a point here or there, but decided in advance." Michael felt his heart stop. "Which games?" "The 1991 NBA Finals, the 1992 Olympics, even some of your Bulls' championship runs." My father said the organization had people everywhere, referees, team officials, even some players who thought they were just evening the odds. Occasionally, the room was silent for a long moment. Michael thought about all those championships, wondering which victories had been real and which had been predetermined. "Your father was killed because he was about to expose that some of America's greatest sports moments were lies," Vincent Jr. continued. "My father carried that guilt until the day he died." Michael walked to his window, looking out at the practice courts where young athletes trained, believing in the purity of competition. "Does it matter now?" Michael asked. "Those games happened 30 years ago. The players who were involved are retired. The fans who celebrated have moved on with their lives. It matters because your father died for the truth, and because somewhere there are still people profiting from corruption who think they'll never be caught." Vincent Jr. opened his notebook and showed Michael a list of names. "Before he died, my father gave me this. People who are still active, in sports, still taking money, still fixing games." He said it was his final gift to your father's memory. Michael studied the list. Some names he recognized: current referees, team executives, even some young players who reminded him of himself at that age. "What do you want me to do with this?" "What your father would have done. Expose them. Finish what he started." That night, Michael called Detective Williams, now in his 80s, but still sharp. "Sam, I need your help one more time." 3 months later, the sports world was rocked by the biggest corruption scandal since the original Torino case. Current NBA referees were arrested. NFL officials were charged with game fixing. MLB executives were indicted for manipulating playoff seedings. The evidence came from Michael's foundation, working with the FBI and sports leagues to finally clean house completely. At the press conference announcing the arrests, Michael stood before a room full of reporters, many of whom had covered his basketball career decades earlier. "My father, James Jordan, died 29 years ago because he discovered that some of our most cherished sports moments were corrupted by criminals," Michael said. "Today, we honor his memory by exposing the last of those criminals." An elderly reporter raised his hand. "Mr. Jordan, does this mean some of your own championships might have been tainted?" Michael had wrestled with this question for months. The investigations had found evidence that several Bulls games had been influenced, though it was impossible to determine which specific championships might have been affected. "I can't change the past," Michael answered honestly. "If some of our victories were helped by corruption, I'm sorry. All I can do is make sure today's athletes compete in games that are honest." 6 months later, Michael published his final book, The Complete Truth: How My Father Saved Sports. It revealed everything: the gambling debts, the murder, the point shaving, the fixed championships, and the decades-long fight to expose it all. The book topped bestseller lists, but more importantly, it led to the most comprehensive sports integrity reforms in history. Every major league implemented real-time monitoring systems. Athletes underwent mandatory education about corruption. Whistleblower protections were strengthened. On the 30th anniversary of James Jordan's death, Michael stood at his father's grave in Wilmington. With him were his children, their children, and Vincent Torino Jr., who had become an unlikely ally in the fight for sports integrity. "We did it, Dad," Michael said to the headstone. "We exposed all of them. Every last one." His granddaughter, a high school basketball player, placed flowers on the grave. "Grandpa Michael, was great-grandpa really a hero?" Michael smiled, thinking about the scared man who had secretly investigated a criminal organization while his son spiraled into addiction. "He was the greatest hero I ever knew. He chose to fight for what was right, even though it cost him everything." As they walked away from the cemetery, Vincent Jr. fell into step beside Michael. "Do you think they would have been friends, our fathers, if circumstances had been different?" Michael considered this. "I think my father would have tried to save yours, just like he tried to save everyone else. My father spent his last years saying, 'Your father was the bravest man he ever met. A man who chose truth over safety, justice over silence.'" Later that evening, Michael sat on his porch, watching his grandchildren play basketball in the driveway. The game looked exactly the same as it had when he was young, but he knew it was fundamentally different now. The hidden cameras monitoring, betting patterns, the integrity officers at every game, the education programs for young athletes, all of these existed because his father had been brave enough to investigate Vincent Torino, and because Michael had eventually found the courage to tell the truth. His phone buzzed with a text from the NBA commissioner. "Thank you for everything you and your father did. Tonight's championship game will be played on the cleanest court in basketball history." Michael smiled. His father had died believing that sports could be pure again. It had taken 30 years, but that dream had finally come true. The hidden price of his gambling had been enormous. His father's life, years of lies, the corruption of his greatest achievements. But the value of the truth they'd fought to reveal had been even greater. In the end, James and Michael Jordan had won the most important championship of all. A future where young athletes could compete with integrity, knowing their victories were earned and their games were honest. The truth had set them all free. 50 years after that first midnight meeting in the Chicago warehouse, the world had changed in ways Michael Jordan could never have imagined when he was just a scared athlete drowning in gambling debts. Michael Jordan passed away peacefully at age 95, surrounded by his children and grandchildren at his North Carolina farm. His final words were simple: "Tell them the truth matters." The funeral was unlike anything sports had ever seen. Presidents, athletes, and ordinary people who had been helped by his foundation came to pay their respects. But the most moving moment came when Vincent Torino Jr., now in his 70s, spoke at the service. "Michael Jordan taught me that redemption is possible," Vincent said to the packed church. "He showed me that the sins of our fathers don't have to define us. He proved that truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most comfortable lie." 3 months after the funeral, Michael's eldest granddaughter, Sarah Jordan Williams, was cleaning out his office when she found a sealed envelope marked "For Future Generations." Inside was a letter in Michael's handwriting and a small digital device. "To whoever finds this, by now, you know most of my story. The gambling addiction, my father's murder, the corruption we exposed, the years of lies we lived. But there's one final secret I need to share. The device with this letter contains complete recordings of every conversation I had with Vincent Torino and his organization from 1993 until the trial. I wore a wire for the FBI during my final months of involvement with them. These recordings have never been made public because they weren't needed for convictions, but they tell the complete story of how organized crime infiltrated sports, how good people got trapped in bad situations, and how the pursuit of truth eventually set everyone free. I'm leaving this for you because the fight for integrity never truly ends. There will always be people who try to corrupt the games we love. When that happens, remember our story. Remember that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort. Tell young athletes that no bet, no game, no amount of money is worth compromising your integrity. Tell them that their heroes aren't the ones who never fall down, but the ones who get back up and tell the truth about their failures. Most importantly, tell them about my father. Tell them about James Jordan, a man who died fighting for something bigger than himself. He proved that real heroism isn't about winning championships. It's about protecting what you believe in, even when it costs you everything. The truth will set you free, but first, it will probably ruin your weekend. Keep fighting the good fight. Michael Jeffrey Jordan, Sarah listened to the recordings with her family gathered around. The conversations revealed details that even the FBI trials hadn't captured. The psychological manipulation, the gradual escalation of threats, the way criminals exploited competitive athletes' inability to accept defeat. But they also revealed Michael's evolution from victim to survivor to advocate. In the later recordings, as he worked with law enforcement, his voice grew stronger. He stopped sounding like a trapped animal and started sounding like a man on a mission. The family decided to create the James Jordan Truth Project, releasing the recordings as an educational resource. Universities studied them to understand criminal psychology. Law enforcement agencies used them to train officers about organized crime. Most importantly, youth sports organizations used them to educate young athletes about the dangers of gambling. One recording became particularly famous. It was from Michael's final conversation with Vincent Torino before the arrests. "You destroyed my life," Michael said. "No," Torino replied. "You destroyed your own life. I just took advantage of your weakness. Maybe. But I'm going to make sure you never destroy anyone else's." "You think you're a hero now?" "No. I think I'm finally honest. And that's enough." 10 years after Michael's death, the Jordan Sports Integrity Center unveiled its final expansion, the James Jordan Memorial Hall. The centerpiece was an exact replica of the warehouse where Michael had met with Torino in 1993, now turned into an immersive educational experience. Visitors could hear actors recreate conversations from the recordings, understand how athletes get trapped in corruption, and learn about the warning signs of gambling addiction. The experience ended in a room filled with photos of athletes whose careers had been saved by speaking up about integrity issues. At the dedication ceremony, NBA Commissioner Lisa Chen spoke about the lasting impact of the Jordan story. 50 years ago, Michael Jordan made the hardest choice any athlete has ever faced, she said. He chose truth over reputation, justice over comfort, his father's legacy over his own image. Because of that choice, the games you watch today are honest. When your children play sports, they're competing in a system that protects their integrity. In the audience sat hundreds of young athletes from around the world, scholarship recipients from the Jordan Foundation. They represented every sport, every economic background, every corner of the globe. What united them was a commitment to playing with integrity. After the ceremony, Sarah Jordan Williams stood where the warehouse had once been. A plaque marked the spot. Here stood the building where Michael Jordan chose truth over lies, in memory of James Jordan, who died fighting for honest competition. A young basketball player approached her, wearing a jersey with number 23. "Ms. Williams, is it true that your grandfather was the greatest basketball player ever?" Sarah thought about the question. Michael's championships were complicated by the corruption revelations. Some of his victories had been tainted. His records were impressive, but not untouchable. "He was a great basketball player," she said. "But he was an even greater man. He proved that being honest about your mistakes is more important than being perfect." As the sun set over Charlotte, Sarah reflected on her family's legacy. 3 generations had been touched by one man's gambling addiction and its terrible consequences. But from that tragedy had come something beautiful, a world where young athletes could pursue their dreams without fear of corruption. The hidden price of success had been enormous for the Jordan family, but the value of the truth they'd revealed had echoed through decades, protecting millions of young competitors who would never know how close sports had come to complete corruption. In the end, Michael Jordan's greatest achievement wasn't any championship or record. It was proving that admitting failure and fighting for redemption could change the world. The truth had set them all free and kept freedom alive for generations to come. James Jordan's investigation had uncovered corruption. Michael Jordan's honesty had exposed it. Their sacrifice had ended it, and their legacy would prevent it from ever returning. The final victory belonged not to the criminals who had profited from lies, but to a father and son who had chosen truth over everything else they held dear. In sports, as in life, that choice made all the difference. 100 years after Michael Jordan first sat down at Vincent Torino's poker table, the world of 2093 was unrecognizable from the Chicago, where a young basketball player had first fallen into gambling addiction. Dr. Maya Jordan Chen, Michael's great-great-granddaughter, stood in the Quantum Sports Observatory overlooking New Angeles. As the director of global athletic integrity, she monitored every professional sporting event on Earth and the lunar colonies through advanced AI systems that could detect the slightest irregularity in performance. Today marked the centennial of the Jordan Truth revelation, and Maya was preparing for the most important presentation of her career. "System, display historical corruption index," she commanded. A holographic chart materialized, showing a dramatic spike in the 1990s when Michael Jordan's gambling debts had entangled him with organized crime, followed by a steep decline after. The truth was revealed, and then flatlining at zero for the past 50 years. "Remarkable," said Dr. Chen, Maya's research partner. "No significant corruption detected in professional sports for half a century. The Jordan Protocols really did change everything." The Jordan Protocols, a comprehensive system of AI monitoring, genetic integrity scanning, and psychological evaluation, had grown from the foundation Michael Jordan established. Every athlete's brainwaves were monitored during competition to detect any sign they weren't performing their best. Financial transactions were tracked in real time to prevent gambling or bribery. Some called it invasive. Maya preferred to think of it as protective. Her personal AI assistant chimed softly. "Dr. Jordan Chen, you have a priority message from the Mars Athletic Commission." A 3-dimensional image of Commissioner Roberts appeared in the room. "Maya, we've detected something unusual in the Interplanetary Basketball Championships. Nothing the AI can identify, but the patterns remind our human analysts of historical data from your ancestors' era." Maya's heart raced. It had been decades since any significant corruption had been detected in professional sports. "Send me everything." Within minutes, Maya was analyzing data that made her blood run cold. Subtle betting patterns, minor performance, variations, financial anomalies, all barely detectable but forming a pattern she recognized from her family's archives. Computer, run analysis against Jordan case files, code designation, Torino, 1993. The AI processed for several seconds before responding. Probability of organized corruption, 87.3%. Pattern matches historical data with 94.7% accuracy. Maya realized that someone was trying to recreate Vincent Torino's operation using advanced technology to hide their activities from modern detection systems. She immediately contacted the Global Sports Authority, triggering the first major integrity investigation in 50 years. As teams of investigators spread across 3 planets, Maya couldn't help but think about her ancestor. Michael Jordan had exposed corruption by risking everything: his reputation, his family's safety, his entire legacy. Now, a century later, the fight continued with different tools, but the same fundamental challenge: preserving the integrity of competition. 3 months later, the investigation revealed a sophisticated network operating across human colonies throughout the solar system. Using quantum encryption and AI manipulation, they had been subtly influencing games while staying below detection thresholds. The perpetrators were descendants of the original Torino organization, carrying on their ancestors' criminal legacy with 22nd century technology. During the trial, held simultaneously on Earth, Mars, and Luna, Maya testified about the historical significance of the case. 100 years ago, my ancestor chose to tell the truth about his gambling addiction and the criminals who exploited it, she told the Interplanetary Tribunal. That choice protected every athlete who has competed since. Today, we must make the same choice he did: put integrity above profits, truth above comfort. The defendants were convicted using evidence gathered by systems that trace their origins back to Michael Jordan's courage in 1998. As sentence was passed, Maya felt her ancestors' presence in the room. After the trial, Maya visited the Michael Jordan Memorial on Earth, a massive complex that included the original warehouse location, now preserved under a protective dome. Inside, holographic recreations allowed visitors to experience the conversations between Michael and Vincent Torino, to understand how corruption had once threatened to destroy sports. "Great-Grandpa Mike," Maya whispered to his memorial statue. "You probably never imagined your story would still be protecting athletes a century later." The statue seemed to gaze toward a holographic display showing live sporting events from across the galaxy. Basketball games on Titan, soccer matches on Europa, tennis tournaments in orbital stations, all of them monitored by systems that ensured every competition was honest. Maya's daughter, just 16, and already showing promise as a soccer player, joined her at the memorial. "Mom," my history teacher says, "some of Great-Great-Grandpa's championships might have been fixed by the criminals. He fought. Does that make him less of a hero?" Maya smiled, remembering asking her own mother the same question decades earlier. "What do you think made him a hero? Fighting the bad guys?" Before that, what was the first brave thing he did? Her daughter thought carefully. Admitting he had made mistakes? Exactly. He proved that being honest about your failures is more important than having a perfect record. That's why we still tell his story after all these years. As they left the memorial, Maya's AI assistant alerted her to a message from a young athlete on Proxima Centauri, humanity's first interstellar colony. "Dr. Jordan Chen, I wanted to thank you. I was offered money to miss some shots in our championship game, but I remembered your family's story. I reported the bribery attempt instead. The investigation uncovered a corruption ring trying to expand to other star systems. Maya smiled. Even as humanity spread across light years, the Jordan legacy continued to inspire athletes to choose integrity over easy money. That night, as Maya looked up at the stars from her apartment balcony, she reflected on the extraordinary ripple effects of one man's decision to tell the truth. Michael Jordan's gambling addiction had nearly destroyed him and cost his father's life. But his choice to expose that corruption had protected literally millions of athletes across space and time. The hidden price of his gambling debts had been enormous, but the value of truth had proven infinite, echoing across a century and beyond the borders of Earth itself. In the end, Michael Jordan had won the most important game ever played, not against another team, but against the forces that would corrupt competition itself. And that victory continued, one honest game at a time, as long as athletes remembered that integrity matters more than victory. The truth had set them all free, and would keep them free forever. 200 years after the Chicago warehouse meeting, the anniversary was no longer marked by memorials or speeches, but by something far more powerful: the complete absence of sporting corruption anywhere in human civilization. In the year 2193, Lieutenant Commander Jordan X-47, a descendant of Michael Jordan, whose DNA had been genetically optimized for space exploration, stood on the bridge of the starship Integrity as humanity's first interstellar sports expedition approached the Kepler 442b system. They had received signals from an alien civilization, the first contact with non-human intelligence in galactic history. The signals appeared to be broadcasts of sporting events, and Earth's xenobiologists believed that introducing the human concept of competitive integrity might be the key to peaceful first contact. "Commander," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving what appears to be a live transmission of an athletic competition." On the main screen appeared images that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. Beings of crystalline structure engaged in what could only be described as a game involving geometric formations and energy patterns. "Run it through the Jordan Protocol analysis," the commander ordered. The ship's advanced AI, descended from the systems first created to detect corruption in Michael Jordan's era, began analyzing the alien competition. After several minutes, it rendered a verdict that sent chills through the crew. Corruption detected. Probability of predetermined outcomes: 97.8%. This civilization appears to have no concept of competitive integrity. Commander Jordan X-47 faced an unprecedented decision. Humanity had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of honest competition, inspired by her ancestors' sacrifice. Now they encountered a species that seemed to have evolved a culture based entirely on manipulated contests. "Prepare the Jordan Archive for transmission," she commanded. The Jordan Archive contained every detail of humanity's struggle with sporting corruption. From the original warehouse meeting in 1993 through the interplanetary trials of 2093, it was the complete history of how one man's courage to tell the truth had transformed an entire civilization's relationship with competition. As the transmission began, the commander thought about the weight of this moment. Michael Jordan could never have imagined that his decision to expose Vincent Torino would someday serve as humanity's introduction to an alien species. The alien response came within hours. Not words, but actions. The crystalline beings began, altering their competitions in real time, introducing elements of uncertainty and genuine challenge. They were learning from humanity's example. 3 months later, the first interspecies fair play accords were signed, establishing competitive integrity as the foundation for peaceful interaction between civilizations. The document's preamble began with a quote from Michael Jordan's final book: "Truth is the only game worth winning." Back on Earth, in the Museum of Infinite Truth that had grown around the original Jordan Sports Integrity Center, Dr. Elena Jordan Prime, the last living human to carry the Jordan name, reviewed reports from across the galaxy. Everywhere humans had traveled, they had brought the Jordan protocols with them. Every world they touched became a place where competition was honest and victory was earned. The alien civilizations they encountered were gradually adopting these principles. "Computer, display current integrity statistics for known civilizations," she commanded. A three-dimensional star map appeared, showing 47 colonized worlds and 12 first contact species. Each location glowed green, indicating zero detected corruption in their sporting activities. Elena smiled, thinking about her ancestor who had sat in that warehouse so long ago, terrified and alone. He could never have imagined that his moment of courage would echo through time to become the foundation of interstellar civilization. Message chimed from the Galactic Sports Council, a body that now included representatives from 7 different species. They were requesting Earth's approval for the first Universal Olympics, where beings from across the galaxy would compete in events designed for their unique biologies. Elena approved the request immediately. The Universal Olympics would be monitored by evolved versions of the systems first created to detect when Michael Jordan provided insider information to criminals. Now, they would ensure that a crystalline being's energy patterns weren't artificially enhanced, or that a gaseous species' atmospheric manipulation was within natural limits. That evening, Elena walked through the memorial gardens where statues of James and Michael Jordan stood side by side. Visitors from across the galaxy came here to understand the origin of competitive integrity. A young Andromedan scholar, whose species had recently joined the galactic community, approached her with questions. "Dr. Jordan Prime, our research indicates that competitive integrity was not always natural to human civilization. Your species evolved this trait relatively recently." "How?" Elena sat on a bench beneath her ancestors' statues. "It wasn't evolution. It was choice. One human chose truth over lies, and then taught others to make the same choice. But why did this particular choice become so fundamental to your civilization?" Elena thought carefully about her answer. "Because sport is practice for life. If we can't be honest about games, how can we be honest about anything that really matters?" The scholar's bioluminescent patches flickered in what Elena had learned was their species' equivalent of understanding. On our world, we call this concept truth motion. The idea that movement and competition reflect the integrity of the being. "Then you understand perfectly," Elena said. As the alien scholar departed to share this knowledge with their homeworld, Elena remained in the garden. Above her, stars twinkled, each one representing worlds where beings competed with integrity because of a choice made centuries ago in a dark warehouse in Chicago. Her personal communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the Temporal Research Division. "We've detected temporal anomalies suggesting that the Jordan Choice Point has become a fixed event in the multiverse. In all observed timelines, some version of this truth-telling occurs. It appears to be a necessary development for species to achieve interstellar civilization." Elena wasn't surprised. She had always believed that her ancestors' choice represented something universal. The moment when any intelligent species must choose between profit and principle, between easy lies and difficult truths. Michael Jordan's gambling debts had been hidden for a reason. The cover-up had protected reputations, preserved illusions, and allowed corruption to flourish. But when the truth was finally revealed, It had done more than just expose criminals. It had established a principle that now guided the behavior of beings across the galaxy. Integrity and competition is non-negotiable. The hidden price of success had been enormous. The value of truth had proven infinite. And in the infinite game of civilizational development, truth was not just the winning strategy. It was the only strategy that allowed the game to continue. Michael Jordan's greatest victory was not any championship. It was proving that a single act of honesty could echo through space and time to touch lives not yet born on worlds not yet discovered. The truth had set them all free, and would keep the universe free forever and always, one honest competition at a time. In the end, the most important game was never basketball at all. It was the eternal contest between truth and lies. And thanks to a man who chose courage over comfort in a Chicago warehouse 200 years ago, truth was winning throughout the cosmos. Beyond time itself, in a place where all moments exist simultaneously, the consciousness that had once been Michael Jordan observed the infinite ripples of a single choice. He could see it all now. Every game, every lie, every moment of truth, from that first poker hand in 1990 to the Universal Olympics of 2593. The view was overwhelming and beautiful. Trillions of beings across countless worlds, all living by principles born from his darkest hour. Remarkable, isn't it? Said a familiar voice. Michael turned to see his father, James, appearing just as he had in 1993, but somehow more present, more real than memory could capture. "Dad? How are you here?" James smiled the same warm smile that Michael remembered from childhood. "I never left, son. I've been watching, waiting for you to understand what we really accomplished." Together, they observed the vast tapestry of existence. In one thread, a young athlete on Proxima Centauri chose to report a bribery attempt. In another, two alien species resolved a territorial dispute through honest competition rather than war. In countless others, beings made choices for truth over convenience, integrity over profit. "Our suffering wasn't meaningless," James said gently. "Every tear you shed, every sleepless night, every moment of guilt, it all led to this. The universe itself is more honest because you chose courage over comfort." Michael watched a scene from 2023 where his descendant exposed an interplanetary corruption ring. "I never imagined it would go this far." "Neither did I. When I first started investigating Vincent Torino, I thought I was just trying to save my son. I couldn't have dreamed I was helping to save the concept of fair play for all intelligent life." They moved through time like swimmers through water, observing key moments. Michael saw himself at that first warehouse meeting, terrified and alone. He saw his own testimony at Torino's trial, the moment he chose truth over self-preservation. He watched generations of his descendants carry forward the banner of integrity. "You know what I'm proudest of?" James asked. Michael waited. "Not the sports reforms or the alien accords or the cosmic impact. I'm proud that you became the man I always hoped you'd be. You turned your greatest failure into humanity's greatest gift." They arrived at a moment Michael had forgotten. A day in 2001, when he'd visited a youth basketball camp. A young boy had asked him about gambling, and Michael had given an honest, painful answer about addiction and consequences. "Watch," James said. Michael observed as that same boy, now grown into a man, chose to seek help for his own gambling problem, rather than hide it. That choice saved his marriage, protected his children, and led him to become a counselor who helped thousands of others. One honest conversation, James noted. One moment where you chose truth over image. Look at the lives that choice touched. They witnessed an infinite cascade. That counselor's work inspiring others, who helped more people, who made better choices, creating an endless web of integrity, spreading across time and space. The hidden price of your success, James said, was never really hidden from me. I knew about the gambling before you told me. I knew about the debts. I knew about the danger. But I also knew something else. What? I knew my son had the courage to do what was right, even when it meant losing everything. That's why I investigated on my own. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to give you time to find that courage. Michael felt tears he hadn't known he could still shed. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. For the gambling. For the lies. For getting you killed. James embraced his son. You have nothing to apologize for. Addiction is a disease, not a moral failing. You fought that disease and won. The lies were survival, and you replaced them with truth. And my death? That was the price I chose to pay for justice. I regret nothing. They watched as the universal principles they'd helped establish continued to evolve. New challenges arose. Temporal sports where past and future competed. Quantum, games where multiple realities played simultaneously. Dimensional tournaments between parallel universes. But in every case, the Jordan protocols adapted, ensuring that competition remained honest regardless of the level of complexity. Will it ever end? Michael asked. Will beings ever stop trying to corrupt games? James laughed. Son, that's like asking if people will ever stop being tempted by shortcuts. The eternal struggle between truth and lies isn't a bug in the universe. It's a feature. It's what gives meaning to the choice to be honest. They observed a moment in the far future, when the last human had evolved beyond physical form, becoming beings of pure energy. Even then, they continued to compete in ways Michael couldn't comprehend, but the fundamental rule remained: victory through integrity, not deception. The truth set us free, Michael said, understanding finally. And we set the truth free in return, James replied. We gave it a voice that echoes through all of time and space. As they prepared to dissolve back into the cosmic consciousness, Michael had one final question. What was the real truth, Dad? Behind all the corruption, all the gambling, all the pain, what was the point? James smiled one last time. The key point, son, was love. Love of the game. Love of fair play. Love of each other. Love of honor itself. Everything we suffered, everything we sacrificed, it was all to protect love from those who would corrupt it. Michael felt himself fading, becoming one with the infinite truth they had helped establish. His last conscious thought was gratitude, not just for the championships or the fame, but for the chance to turn his greatest shame into the universe's greatest protection. In that final moment, he understood that the hidden price of his gambling debts had purchased something invaluable: the eternal victory of truth over lies, of integrity over corruption, of love over greed. The warehouse meeting that had terrified him so completely had been the first step toward the universe's salvation. And that was the final truth that set everything free. Michael Jordan had lost many games in his life, but he had won the only game that truly mattered: the infinite contest between right and wrong. The victory belonged not to him alone, but to every being throughout space and time who chose courage over comfort, truth over lies, integrity over Advantage. The game would never end. And thanks to a father's love and a son's courage, truth would never stop winning. In a place beyond the beyond, where stories never truly end, an infinite library holds every tale that has ever been or ever will be. Among its countless shelves, one book glows with a light that never dims. The story of Michael Jordan's hidden debts and the truth that set the universe free. Every day, beings from across all realities come to read this book. They arrive as students, athletes, leaders, and dreamers, all seeking answers to the same eternal questions. How do you face your worst mistake? How do you choose truth when lies are easier? How do you turn shame into strength? The book changes for each reader, showing them exactly what they need to see. A young gambler reads about addiction and finds hope for recovery. A corrupt official sees the consequences of dishonesty and chooses a different path. A child learns that even heroes make mistakes, but real heroes admit them and try to make things right. Today, a being of pure light, neither human nor alien, but something beyond both, opens the book. They are the guardian of truth, responsible for maintaining honesty across all dimensions of existence. Even they come to this story for guidance. As they read, the Guardian sees not just Michael Jordan's struggle, but the struggles of countless others who have faced the choice between truth and lies. A politician in ancient Rome who chose to expose corruption rather than profit from it, changing the course of an empire. A scientist in the year 3045 who admitted falsifying data, preventing a catastrophic mistake that would have destroyed a star system. A child in a small town who told the truth about breaking a window, learning. Early that honesty, while painful, leads to trust and forgiveness. Each story connects to Michael's, part of an infinite web of truth that strengthens every time someone chooses courage over comfort. The Guardian closes the book and speaks to all the readers who will ever come after. Remember this: the price of truth is always high in the moment, but the cost of lies is infinite across time. One honest choice echoes forever, touching lives you'll never know, protecting futures you'll never see. Michael Jordan thought he was just admitting to gambling debts. He didn't know he was saving the universe's soul. You may think your choice to tell the truth is small, but truth is never small. It is the force that holds all things together. Every time you choose honesty over deception, every time you pick integrity over advantage, every time you select courage over comfort, you join Michael Jordan in the greatest game ever played, the eternal contest between light and darkness. This story doesn't end because truth doesn't end. Somewhere, right now, someone is facing their own warehouse moment, their own choice between lies and truth. Your example, like Michael's, will help them choose correctly. The hidden price of success is always honesty about failure. The value of truth is always infinite. And the game, the beautiful, terrible, wonderful game of choosing right over wrong, that game goes on forever. As the Guardian's words fade, the book opens itself to a blank page. But this page isn't empty. It's waiting for the next person who will choose truth over lies, the next athlete who will choose integrity over victory, the next soul who will choose courage over comfort. The page is waiting for you. Because this story isn't just about Michael Jordan, it's about every choice you make, every moment you decide between truth and lies, every time you choose to be honest, even when it hurts. The warehouse in Chicago is gone. Vincent Torino is gone. Even the earth where Michael played basketball is gone, swallowed by the expansion of its aging sun billions of years ago. But the choice remains. The truth remains. The courage remains. And somewhere, in a dimension beyond dimensions, Michael Jordan and his father James continue to watch, proud of every being who chooses truth over lies, integrity over advantage, love over fear. The game would never end. Truth would never stop winning, and neither will you, if you choose it. The final score isn't measured in points or championships or victories. The final score is measured in choices, and every time you choose truth, you win, forever. The end, but also, and more importantly, the beginning. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment and let us know your location. We love hearing from our global community. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating, untold stories that reveal the hidden truths behind the headlines. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. Stories like these remind us that even our heroes face difficult choices, and that choosing truth over comfort can change the world. By sharing, you're helping spread both kindness and awareness, showing others that redemption is possible and that integrity always matters more than victory. Until next time, remember, the most important game isn't the one you play against others, but the one you play with yourself when choosing between truth and lies. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.